Hey folks, great to be with you. My name is Paul Conway. I serve as Chair of Policy and Global Affairs for the American Association of Kidney Patients. In addition to my role with AAKP, I happen to be a 46-year kidney patient who lived for 3 years on dialysis and for the past 26 years through a kidney transplant from the gift of life from a young man that died in a car accident. I thought it was important to participate today, and I'd like to thank Representative Adrian Smith for the invitation to be here to talk about a very important piece of legislation to kidney patients and to doctors that take care of them around the country. So there's an issue that's called venous needle dislodgement, or VND. And to break that down very simply, dialysis patients, when they're connected to their machine, they have tubes that go into their arms that connect them to the life-saving treatment that comes from a dialysis machine. And this is particularly true for hemodialysis patients, those who use dialysis machines that process their blood. The reason why I wanted to participate is because for our organization and many other patient organizations throughout the country, the issue of safety and preventing accidents for those who are on dialysis is a significant issue of concern for us and for policy. And the coverage of new devices and innovations that help assure that is of particular importance. A little bit about our organization. We were founded in 1969 by 6 dialysis patients in Kings County Hospital in New York. Those patients got together and began a letter writing campaign because they knew that the treatments they were getting on dialysis were life-saving, and they wanted to make certain that other patients who were trying to stay alive, stay employed, and stay engaged should have coverage like they do. And so that small group of patients actually began a national campaign to create dialysis coverage for all eligible people in the United States that had kidney failure. And they were successful. It was one of our patients that dialyzed on the floor of the House Ways and Means Committee there in Washington. And it was that patient who grew our organization and gained the coverage of legislation that actually authorized the end-stage renal disease program as we know it today. But key to all of that was making certain that patients were safe and that they had access to innovations that were coming into the marketplace regularly that were designed to optimize their treatments. Now, our organization has worked on policy for the past 50 years, but in particular over the past 10 years, it has been a golden era of innovation to keep patients safe and to make certain that more patients are treated. The size of the problem in the United States of kidney failure has grown significantly. An estimated 37 million Americans have kidney disease, and of those, 800,000 have kidney failure. In 2020, about 130,000 new patients went on to dialysis. And so for what we're talking about here in terms of scale, you can understand the amount of risk that comes with these procedures. But the goal here for national policy has been this: to make certain that more patients have access to home dialysis choices and the choice of transplantation. But in particular, there's been a national consensus, bipartisan, to move more patients from dialysis centers to home. One, because patients prefer that, and two, many of the patients that are able to go home have a more flexible schedule, so they can maintain employment in part-time and full-time jobs as best they're able. And so making certain that they stay safe is important. In the past several years, FDA has approved new dialysis devices that make it possible for a patient to do hemodialysis at home without a caregiver or a family member present to make certain that the blood lines and the process are managed with 2 people. Now you can actually manage it on your own if you're a patient. But here's one of the issues that has come up. Patient comfort and concern about bleeding out if a needle becomes dislodged is quite significant. And so overcoming that barrier or hesitation to increase home dialysis use is very important, not just for the patients, but for our organization, which works diligently to make certain that patients can be independent and employed as much as they can be. And so we're trying to remove a barrier to safety and to prevent a problem here. And the other thing that we've focused on as a matter of policy is to make certain that those types of devices that keep patients safe are accessible. And this is where the legislation that you're going to hear more about today, the Home Dialysis Risk Prevention Act, is very, very important. because what we want to do here ideally is make certain that these patients are looked out for and that the technologies and innovations that become available, like the one that you'll hear from Redsense, the alarm, that it's not a patchwork system of safety across the United States, that this innovation is actually covered within the dialysis payment system, the bundle as they refer to it, so that you can make certain that patients that live in rural areas or historically underserved areas have the same level of access as anybody else. And that's our goal, because the goal is you want to extend choice to people no matter where they live. So if they want to exercise their choice of home dialysis, they can. And that's why we thought it was very important. On May 5th, we publicly came out and endorsed this effort and this bill, because we felt so strongly that through the leadership of Representative Smith and others, that they were focused on patient-centered medicine. And it's the expansion of many of the policy efforts that we pursued in the prior administration under President Trump and the executive order on advancing American kidney health. We were very strong backers of that, and we worked closely with Secretary Azar to develop the language in that prioritizes home dialysis for patients that want to choose that. That same policy is continuing today as CMS considers and implements payment models that encourage greater home dialysis. Now, one of the lessons that we've learned as a patient community during COVID is that many of the patients that wanted to be doing their dialysis at home, and in fact were still in dialysis centers, were starting to make a migration. They had heard the message about the opportunity and the choice, and they were deciding to do home dialysis at a greater number. That has continued. So what we want to do is we want to encourage patients to do that. We want to remove the barrier of hesitation or fear of bleeding out or having a needle dislodge, and take care of those patients so that they have the warning systems and the tools and they can benefit from the innovations that have taken place. I appreciate your consideration. We think it's important legislation. We back it wholeheartedly. And we're very, very pleased to see the bipartisan interest in this issue, because kidney disease is a great equalizer among every citizen. It can happen to anybody. 37 million Americans currently have kidney disease. And it's one of those things where if you know that you could get a treatment and you can do it at home in the comfort of your house, that's a great thing. But removing the fear that comes with that and making certain there are adequate alarms and prevention techniques that are available is very important. So again, appreciate Representative Smith, and thank you for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to attend this session. Patrick, thank you for the invitation. Excited to be here. Just as a backdrop of my experience, I'm a clinician, a nephrologist. For the last 20 years, I've spent my career in the manufacturer space, working for companies like Abbott, where I brought a renal drug to the market, and was working for Baxter as the chief medical officer, which is one of the premier dialysis companies in the country. Throughout the 20 years and through my academic career, the focus of mine has been on patient safety for dialysis patients. This particular topic, venous needle dislodgement, I'm going to talk a little bit about, is of particular concern because it does not happen frequently, but when it happens, it has dire consequences. So thank you once again for the opportunity. I work for ECRI. ECRI is an independent, not-for-profit organization situated in Pennsylvania. The history of ECRI started about 50 years ago when Dr. Joe Noble, a critical care anesthesiologist, was trying to resuscitate a baby. And he used 3 consecutive neonatal resuscitators. All 3 of them failed. The baby died. And he asked the question, why is a product which is already approved failing 3 consecutive times? The answer to that question was, he set up a lab, he started testing medical devices, and he created a newsletter to tell healthcare institutions about the concerns from a safety standpoint. That was the origination of ECRI about 50 years ago. Obviously, we've evolved from there. We continue to have roots in clinical engineering and human factors, but we have become an evidence-based practice center, and most importantly, we are a patient safety office. So we've collected over 5 million adverse events over the last 10 years, and those adverse events give us critical safety insights that we can go to healthcare systems and talk about safety and root cause analysis. Just some numbers for you. We have the largest independent lab in the country, which has biomedical engineers, mechanical engineers, et cetera, who actually have tested about almost 300 devices over the last 3 years. And we put out independent assessments. I'm going to talk a little bit about Redsense and the assessment that we've done. In addition to that, we send out safety alerts. Safety alerts many a time are faster than what FDA sends out alerts to healthcare institutions. And then, as I said earlier, we've collected over 5 million adverse events where we derive key safety insights from. So Patrick touched on the top 10 technology hazards. The fact that we are in 3 out of 4 hospitals in the United States, we get key insights, key customer feedback. And based on that key customer feedback, based on the adverse events that we evaluate on a daily basis, and the experts that we have, we create what is called the top 10 technology hazard list. This technology hazard list is sort of a predictor to what could happen in the healthcare system during that particular year. So in 2023, we published the top 10 technology hazard list, and the number 4 hazard list, which is stated here, is undetected venous needle dislodgement or bloodline separation during hemodialysis can lead to death. We had identified that because we are seeing signals that actually are telling us that this continues to be a concern and could be more of a concern because care is transitioning into the home. So what is venous needle dislodgement? I think it was touched upon earlier, but very simply put, dialysis is all about taking blood out of a patient into a dialysis machine, filtering that blood, taking toxins out, and redirecting the blood back through the venous system into the patient, into the body of a patient. And the venous needle in this instance sometimes gets dislodged. Why is it a problem? It's a problem because blood flow rates are about 300 to 500 ml per minute. We all have approximately 5 liters of blood. If a venous needle is dislodged, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes for our whole blood to actually exsanguinate and come out. So it's a very risky, obviously very critical and risky in that state. So it's important that the venous needle dislodgement does not occur. There are quite a few reasons why it happens. One is the needle is not taped appropriately. 2, patients are anxious, they move around and the needle gets dislodged. 3, there's what is called the bloodline separation. When you have a central line and the dialysis catheters are attached to the central line, there could be bloodline separation. There are many causes for this, we see events, continue to see events, which actually tell us that this continues to be a problem. In fact, we recently had a webinar about a week ago. We polled about 30 people who participated in that webinar. 50% of them said that they had noticed a venous needle dislodgement in their dialysis centers. So it really continues to be a problem. The issue is that we do not need one more alarm to tell us it's a problem. We need a technological solution. It's important that we have a technological solution because alarms could be ignored. And as I said earlier, detachments are of particular concern because when you have dialysis being conducted at home, you don't have a trained personnel watching over the patient. So caregiver is responsible for taking care of the patient. So it becomes even more imperative that when care goes to the home, that we should be more cognizant of this. There is something called the venous line pressure monitor, which is inbuilt into a dialysis machine. You might ask the question, why is this not detecting venous needle dislodgement? The answer is the pressure on the blood line is significantly higher than the pressure in the vein. So the ability to detect is very minimal. So this is really not an answer for recognizing venous needle dislodgement. What are the recommendations? We give quite a few recommendations to caregivers. First, verify that the needle and connections are secure. In dialysis units, if you've been to a dialysis unit, typically you have patients who are covering themselves with blankets. So you don't see the venous needle as such, and that if it gets dislodged, it's not recognized. So really having access site visible is important, and having a technology solution for a blood leak detector is important as well. And the two recommendations we have for the industry, which we work closely with, is technology solution for venous needle dislodgement. You're going to hear more about this after my talk. And then also a blood leak detector, which actually then will identify when there's blood leak across a venous site.
I'm here to let you know a little bit about our device, the Redsense alarm, but more importantly, educate you a little bit more on venous needle dislodgement. Venous needle dislodgement is a very serious and very unpredictable event that can happen when patients are on dialysis. The venous pressure alarm that Dr. Kamala mentioned is the only protective, is the only protection that a patient has right now within the dialysis machine. But the venous pressure alarms are very, and they're notoriously unreliable. A patient may lose a significant amount of blood before the venous pressure alarm detects the change in pressure, or even more often, it just does not go off. Years ago, our product was the brainchild and the result of nurses actually being concerned about several undetected venous needle dislodgements for their patients, and they were fatal. They approached engineers at a university and asked if they could develop some type of a device that was separate from the dialysis machine that would monitor the venous needle site where the needle goes into the patient and reliably and quickly let the patient or the caregivers know that blood is leaking and that the needle's pulled out. That's where the Redsense alarm started. It's important, especially for patients to be monitored for venous needle dislodgement if they're confused or they're restless. But because home dialysis is much more common than it used to be, and they're encouraging patients to go home to do home dialysis because the results are much more effective. The patients can lead their normal lives. They feel better because they don't have the ups and downs of going to a treatment 3 times a week, and then they feel crappy for a while, and then they start to feel better. With the home dialysis, it's a much more even and consistent and actually more natural type of filtration of the toxins. But when patients go home, they no longer have the nurses or the care techs right there to help if a needle would slip out. A lot of patients now are actually home alone and do their dialysis treatments by themselves, or they sleep while they're having a treatment. And that's where the venous needle dislodgement can really impact home patients, because it can occur so quickly again, it's so unpredictable that a patient can lose their entire amount of blood in just a matter of minutes. As a young nurse, I witnessed a VND, or venous needle dislodgement, and it was like somebody took the end off of a fire hose, because it was under, the blood returning to the patient is under so much pressure that blood was being just emitted and spewed all over. So it happens very, very quickly. As Dr. Kamala mentioned, in just a matter of minutes, a patient can lose a lot of blood. If that happens, then they're at home and they're not looking at their access, monitoring it, the results can be catastrophic. So with the Redsense alarm, it's independent from the dialysis machine. It works with fiber optics, and there's a sensor patch that's placed over the venous needle insertion site. As long as the needle stays in the patient where it's supposed to stay, the alarm unit just sits there quietly monitoring. But if the venous needle pulls out a little bit or comes completely out, it immediately sends a very loud alarm, and it has flashing lights to let the patient know, or the caregiver, that they need to quickly turn that dialysis machine off and stop the blood loss. There is an example of the Redsense alarm on the table if you choose to look at it. But we like to think of venous needle blood loss detection as having a smoke alarm in your house. Almost everybody has a smoke alarm, and you hope you never hear that smoke alarm go off, because obviously that means there's a fire. But you're eternally grateful that you have something there monitoring quietly behind the scenes to let you know that there's trouble there. That is pretty much it for the Redsense alarm. If you have questions, we are more than happy to answer any questions. I would like to add that with the bill that's being introduced, it would cover alarm units, blood loss detection alarm units like the Redsense alarm, and included in the bundle payment plan. Right now it's not included. And that is sometimes pressures patients to remain in the clinic because they are so concerned about bleeding out while they're at home. So if the Redsense alarm or similar products can be provided, included in the bundle, then that would certainly be a great boon for patient safety. Thank you.
So for 2023, we know venous needle dislodgement was on the list of the top 10. How do you determine that list? How do you determine its rank and why it's...
We are, as I said, present in 3 out of 4 hospitals in the United States, and we get information from those hospitals in terms of what is going wrong, what could go wrong. So we get a lot of information from 3 of the 4 hospitals in the United States. We are a patient safety office, so we collect adverse event information. As I said earlier, over the last 10 years, we've collected about 5 million adverse events. That gives us key insights. And then we have clinical and engineering experts within ECRI. We also obviously go to the MAUDE database. And then we are understanding of the technological innovations that are coming down the pike. So all these things in combination, we actually have an expert team which evaluates this information. We have an external advisory board that helps us put this information together. So it's semi-analytical in nature, but generally speaking, top 10 hazard list by ECRI is really awaited by health systems because they plan to actually institute mitigation measures to prevent those hazards from happening.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges of venous needle dislodgement from a standpoint of how long do you have before a typical person might sanguinate, And let's say you don't have a fatality, what types of interventions do you need typically with someone who's lost that amount of blood?
It depends on the size of the patient. Obviously, men have a greater blood volume than women, but the average patient, if the venous needle dislodges, it also depends on how fast the blood pump is returning the blood back to the patient. But just in a matter of minutes, they can lose a significant amount of blood. If it's caught early, the patient may not need a treatment. If the patient loses more blood, it may be possible that the patient will have to be sent to the hospital. Depending on the amount of blood loss, they may require blood transfusions. Patients in end-stage renal disease are also additionally ill. So when they come into the emergency department, the fact that they are a dialysis patient is an additional concern, and they may be sent to the intensive care unit. You know, if they lose a significant amount of blood, it may be that they will not make it despite all of the efforts with trying to give them blood products. And then other types of organ failure can occur depending on the condition of the patient. So it can be personally devastating for the patient, and it can also be potentially life-threatening. And the cost can be astronomical.
Just want to add to what Jane said. Patients on dialysis are already anemic to begin with. They already have iron deficiency anemia. Their hemoglobins are low to begin with. They do lose blood every dialysis session through dialysis lines. So they're already vulnerable as a population to begin with. So small amounts of blood loss will have severe consequences. So it's really imperative that we protect the patients from venous blood loss.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the legislation and sort of why we're here with that particular bill. Early on, we had discussions with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services about including the Redsense device within the bundle. What we quickly learned from CMS was that their hands are tied. Essentially, the regulation says that the only new additional add-on devices that can be added to the bundle must be recently recognized by FDA, approved by FDA within the past 3 years. So the Redsense medical device has been on the market since 2007. It is the only FDA-approved device specifically to address venous needle dislodgement. So this legislation really, I think, will assist in 2 ways. One, I think from the information you've heard today, from someone who's suffered with kidney disease, someone who's researched the risks related to kidney disease and venous needle dislodgement, and someone who has produced a device to try to prevent that hazard. All of us would want our loved ones, if they were at home on home hemodialysis, to have a device that would ensure that if they fell asleep or if they rolled over, that the venous needle wouldn't come out and they'd be alone bleeding out. And unfortunately, that's happening too often. Fatalities as well as incidents where people are having to go to acute care settings for significant treatment. Medicare spends a lot of money on kidney disease, nearly $40 billion per year. The average cost for someone on hemodialysis under Medicare is over $100,000 a year. The cost of protecting someone who's on home hemodialysis with a Redsense device or some type of monitor that FDA might approve in the future is relatively small in comparison to the dollars that we're spending to address this disease. And so this legislation will ensure that these devices, this class of devices, is guaranteed to be part of the bundle that kidney patient receives should they wish to dialyze at home. And we think that that is going to significantly reduce the incidence of venous needle dislodgement deaths and traumatic injury. And so we ask for your boss's support. So hopefully you'll take this message back to your offices. We would appreciate co-sponsors on Congressman Smith's bill, HR 3118. And we just so thank our speakers for being here today and for what the value that they've added to this briefing. Thank you for being here, and please take the message back to your offices that we need this legislation to protect kidney patients.